One of them, one letter, was a lipstick mark. And I wrote back to him and said, "Oh, who was the lipstick mark on that letter?" He said, "No, that's not lipstick, Chris." He said, "That's menstrual blood."
Oh, jeez. Like, wow. Christopher Berry-Dee, thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate it. I know you're extremely busy. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, and thanks very much for having me on. And let's hope we can make a really good show.
Well, for those that don't know, I mean, you are the world's foremost true crime author. You're an investigative criminologist. You've interviewed numerous mass murderers, serial killers. So how did you become fascinated, with serial killers?
Well, it's a short story, really. I was in the Royal Marine Commandos of Green Beret for about 11 years. I ended up doing anti-terrorism work in Northern Ireland and in the Far East with terrorism. And when I left the Corps, I had this thing about, what about people that kill for fun? Instead of for religious or motifs and stuff. And then I started collecting these murder case book series. And in these magazines, there's about 230 of them. It turned out to be quite an expensive exercise, I can tell you. But there were people like Harvey the Hammer Carrington, Henry Lee Lucas, Kenneth Bianchi, and I wrote to these people just to see how they felt about what they'd done and everything else. And they started to write back, and then over time, I did a couple of other books, and they were quite successful. And then Fraser Ashford, the late Fraser Ashford, and we were like brothers. And he said to me one day, "Well, would you like to go to America and film these people on camera for a TV series?" And that TV series, although it was 1993, 94, is still being screened on Amazon Prime today. So we broke the mold. No doubt about that, because everybody's interviewing these people these days.
Yeah.
And then I started writing. I wrote the book Talking to Serial Killers, Their Own Words. That has now become the world's #1 series of books, with millions being sold in many languages. So it was all fluke, really, but that's how it was.
What is the series on Amazon called? Just for the viewers that don't know.
It's called The Serial Killers.
The Serial Killers. Okay.
Yeah, it's got Bill Hirons, Ted Bundy, Arthur Shawcross, Monster of the Rivers, Kenneth Bianchi. But it was quite a crude, when you look at it today with modern editing and stuff like that, it was quite crude. But we visited all the crime scenes and everything else, and it's quite iconic as a series.
Okay. Well, congratulations on that and on the books. I actually became really interested in one particular case after having another crime author on my podcast, Sue Coletta, who told me about Joanne Dennehy. And I never, heard much about it. I was still focusing on the Richard Ramirez, the Ted Bundys, the Jeffrey Dahmers, and I never knew much about Joanne Dennehy. But after doing some digging, she probably, to put it bluntly, she scares the shit out of me.
Well, I like it when people are blunt.
Good. Great. Then you're at the right podcast.
I don't mince my words either. There's no point in bullshitting people in your books or anything else. I'm just a man, I'm like everybody else. I try to say it straight. When you compare Joanne Dennehy to Aileen Wuornos, and I wrote the book Monster, which went with the movie starring Charlize Theron.
Yes.
When you compare with her, Lee Wuornos was a lightweight, and she only killed these men because they beat her up and they knocked her about. She was a hooker, so they beat her up and abused her. And so she took out a pistol and shot them, and good for her. Joe Dennehy is in another league altogether. You know, a firearm is quite distant. It's quite clinical, really, I know, for want of a better phrase. She gets up close and personal, does Joe, with about a 4-inch pocket knife, folding pocket knife, not the one that's on the cover of that book, but a small little knife.
Yeah.
And you know, she stabbed one man 40 times in broad daylight walking his dog, and then she licked the blood off the blades of the knife. I mean, that's up close and personal and bloody evil. They'd already killed 3 men.
Yes.
No, I mean, she'd done 3 guys already. One was asleep in his bed, he was drunk, helpless. You know, she said to me, you know, killing you would be good for me. And
she told you this. She told you this.
Yeah, she did. And you know, I always say that if a man had gone to bed with her at night, he wouldn't have woken up in the morning.
Yeah.
So what she's done is they've gone on what the Americans called the lamb, you know, after these 3 murders. And they've gone down to the West Country, and she suddenly sees this guy walking a dog, broad daylight, and she says to Gary Stretch, who's her accomplice, you know, stop, I want that dog. And she gets out of the car and she stabs this man. He turned around to her. First of all, he felt a punch in his back, and he turned around and he said, "What are you doing? You didn't feel any pain." And she said, "I'm going to kill you." And then 10 minutes later, she found she left him in a pool of blood on the road, by the road. And then 10 minutes later, she come across another man walking a dog, and she stabbed him 40 times, and then stole the dog. This woman is dangerous.
She also said, "Oh, look, you're bleeding. I'd better do some more." I think I said, "Just leave me alone, please." But she didn't. She just carried on.
Well, yeah. I mean, did her stabbings progress the amount of time she stabbed each victim?
Well, the first stabbing, you know, there were quite a few wounds, you know, fatal wounds. Second one was just through the heart, I think, with a guy. But she was obviously, she had a hatred for men because of her childhood and the way she'd been. She felt that she'd been used, and her sister was doing very well in life, you know. And she got, I think, a pathological hatred for men. And when a victim is stabbed multiple times, we would call that an overkill.
Yeah.
Then that shows a pathological hatred built up inside. It's not a shot to the head and that's it. The stabbing itself is actually her psychopathology, her evil coming out, and that is exhibited in the way she attacks these people with utter ferocity. You can't say anything else. It's absolute a bloodbath.
I mean, with regards to all these serial killers, there's you know, there's always the debate nature versus nurture. She didn't have a bad childhood, did she?
You're correct. She did not have a bad childhood. Her father and mother were middle class. They did the very best for her. Say she had a younger sibling. She was well educated. And her letters to me are written, they're written beautifully. The syntax is great. The spelling is perfect. The handwriting is great. She was, as the senior officer in the case, Martin Brunning told me.
Brunning. Yeah.
He said she was hot wire to become a lawyer. I mean, she was a musician. She was a good sports girl. She had everything going for her.
So where did the change come in? At what point?
Well, the change is quite easily to locate when you read the book, and it comes about when she's sort of like 15. Yeah. She falls in with some fairground workers who ply her with drink and very, very hard drugs, and she's obviously getting screwed as well at the same time.
Yeah.
And this starts to affect her brain. There's no doubt about that. These toxic substances are going into her brain, into her bloodstream. And as we all know, that this sort of alcohol and drug abuse, when a child or a young girl is young, it gets into the brain. It poisons the brain effectively, and it will do that up until the age of 21, 22, and this is common knowledge. So this is what's up. This is what's turned her brain. Now, her parents are then trying to struggle to try to sort of stop these violent outbursts and bring her back onto line. But the more they try it, and they try to bring her back to a normal girl again, their little darling, the more she rebels.
Yeah.
And they can't put it together. And at school, she's drinking a bottle of whiskey in class and throws it through the window when the teacher says, you know, put that down, Joe. And so you've got this slow progression. But at the same time, she's hating herself for it because her sister's doing so well. She's working for NATO or something. She smashes up her father's brand new observatory, £15,000 worth of damage. And she's only 15 or 16, and there's no bringing it back. The social workers can't do anything with her. She's a loose cannon.
Because when when I first delved into her background, I would think her hate for men, in a lot of cases it stems from the father, and this wasn't the case. And then she met a guy called John Treanor. I think she was 15 or 16. He was in his 20s, I think 21, 6 years older than her. And did he abuse her?
She met this guy called John Treanor when he was out walking a dog. She was absent from school. He had an Alsatian, and she says that she loves dogs. I mean, I was on a TV program recently, and they said, "Oh, she loves dogs." Well, she doesn't love dogs at all because imagine these two guys in the West Country walking their dogs,
yeah, and
these dogs are very sensitive, and they see their owner being stabbed to death with blood everywhere. That's not loving a dog. No. So John Treanor was a bit dense, and he and Joe started seeing each other. And then Joe decided to leave home, and John Treanor said, "Well, you can come and live with me and my mum if you like." Well, his mother didn't want anything to do with Joanna, so she said no. So the two of them decided to, live together but travel the country, and they started. And when they were shoplifting, they were mixing with a lot of drug addicts, and then she got pregnant, and the terrible thing here is, and we talk about nature versus nurture, which you brought up just now, she never touched a baby. Yes. She never covered it. She never nurtured it. She never breastfed it.
She almost scalded my second daughter, the youngest one, in the bath, lifting her into the bath, and I'd got in there to grab just before it happened because she'd been drinking.
And we all know now that this nature versus nurture thing is that the baby is not be able to bond with its mum.
Yeah.
So John Treanor became a surrogate mother, really. Mm. He did everything, while Joe was bringing men back to the house and fucking them in front of Treanor. Yeah. And he couldn't do anything about it. And then she had another baby, afterwards, and she never touched that. She had nothing. She's cold. People don't realise just how ice cold this woman is.
Were you ever in contact with these kids?
Well, no. I mean, there's two things about my job that I have to be very careful about, and that is, I've worked on cold cases and I've cleared up cold case homicides where I will always approach the next of kin of the victims. Sometimes to say, look, I'm going to do this, I'm going to clear this up, or I think I'm going to clear this up. but I need, you know, they're still grieving. You know, they haven't got their daughter's body back or something like that. You know, I'm probably able to do it with a wing and a prayer. But the thing is, I don't want to intrude in that sort of thing. And I was told that the two children are quite badly damaged, emotionally damaged, so that it's not for me to go worrying them.
Yeah.
The other thing was, I did speak to John Treanor, and I said, well, look, could I come and interview you out of a matter of courtesy? And he said, yeah, okay, you can come and see me. So I travelled about 300 miles to see him. And when I got knocked on his door, he didn't open it. And I hung around for about 2 hours trying to get hold of him. And then I got home, and I got up there about 11 o'clock in the morning, I think.
Yeah.
And I got back home, and then I eventually contacted him. I said, what happened to you? I drove all the way up to see you, John, you know, and what happened? He said, oh, we went for a Chinese takeaway. And I thought, what the fuck? What, 11 o'clock in the morning? You find a Chinese takeaway open at 11 o'clock in the morning? And then, of course, he wanted 15,000 or God knows how much money from a newspaper, you know, and I don't buy into that.
Wow. Okay. Jeez. Like, okay. So, so the opinion on John Treanor isn't very high.
Well, there's two ways of looking at this. You know, we are what we are. You know, he's doing a wonderful job for these two children.
Yeah.
You know, I can't take that away from him. You know, he's cared for them all their lives so far. He's doing his best under probably strange circumstances. That's not a difficult thing. You know, and the fact that he let me down was a pain in my ass, but there we are. I have to live with that. But the thing is, you know, he really should have realised what sort of woman she was very shortly after he'd met her. And anybody with half a brain would have said, nah, I'm not having any more to do with you. I'm going.
What? At what point did he decide enough is enough?
What he decided enough was enough when she brought another man home after the first baby was born. And you see that knife on that cover?
Yeah.
That was the knife. And she flipped because John said, well, look, you know, I don't want another man in the house. And she told him where to go.
Yeah.
And she flew into a rage because she was drunk, and she stabbed that blade into the floorboards. And she said, I'm going to kill you if you say that again. Well, okay. John Treanor immediately picked up the kid and cleared off to his mother's.
Yeah, good for him. Yeah, it's a wise decision.
But then Joe ended up in jail for some other offences or something. Okay. And then when she came out, when she was in prison, she started writing to him, and she pleaded, "Look, I'm sorry." And she's a very manipulative woman.
Yes.
You know, I want you back. I love you. I love the kids. You know, I love the kid. You know, I'll change. I'll do this. I'll do that. Anything else, because she had nobody else. She couldn't go back to her parents.
Yeah. And
like a sap, he had her back. And then they had another baby. They haven't got a penny to their name, and yet they have another baby. How irresponsible is that? How irresponsible of that is of him?
Yeah. Well, for anyone really in a situation like that. But then she meets. Well, how does she meet Gary Stretch? Now, Gary Stretch is an interesting character. I think he's 7'3". I mean, the guy is a giant. How did they meet?
Well, Gary Stretch had just come out of prison. You know, he's a career criminal.
Yeah.
He was in a bail hostel, and she was in the bail hostel at the same time.
Okay.
And they met. And you're right, he's 7'3". He's the second tallest man in Britain. And in fact, he's so tall. Every time they move him from one prison to another prison, they have to make a bed specially for him because he's too big.
Yeah.
Which is quite a remarkable achievement by anybody's book. And he used to drive her around because she didn't have a driving license, and he called himself the Undertaker because his body sometimes in the back of the car. But if you can imagine a 7'3" in a little car, his knees were up round his throat, round his chin when he was driving, you know, with the steering wheel. You know, I mean, he's an idiot.
You've described her. She's petite. She's not. She's yeah.
Put it this way: she was petite. I mean, she's bloated up now in prison. I mean, you know, I've got some. I've got people, a couple of people in the prison that I keep an eye. I sort of like tell me what's going on.
Yeah.
But I mean, she's not her. She was a very pretty little girl when she was young, but now she's like life's chewed on her. Prison does that. Prison wrecks you, you know.
When she was arrested, I heard that she targeted Rose West, who was another serial killer, and they had to move her to another prison.
Yeah, what happened was that she went to Joe was after she told the judge to fuck off on pleading guilty, which she did do. That's what she said. He asked her, "Are you sure you at the Old Bailey? Are you sure you're going to change your mind, Mrs. Dennehy?" You know, she go, "Oh, fuck you."
And this was in the pretrial, right?
This was at the sentencing phase.
Okay, all right.
And at the Old Bailey. And anyway, she ended up in HMP Bronzefield. And lo and behold, is the other most dangerous woman in the British justice system in the same prison, Rose West. As you rightly say, you know, her husband were a tag team couple of murderers. Dismembered bodies down in the basement of a house in Cromwell Street in Gloucester. And Joanne Dennehy walked into this prison, and you know, in prisons they got, men's prisons, especially in America and places like that, they got what they call a shot caller. Okay. You know, the guy that is the main man. You know, he organises his troops and all that around him and stuff. Well, Joe went in there immediately, and she immediately put her stamp of authority on that prison. And she turned around to Rose West and said, "I'm going to kill you tonight. I'll kill you. I'm the boss. I'm the bitch on the block now." So Rose West, who's really not, you know, a very intelligent or very strong woman, immediately called the prison officers and got herself put on what we call Rule 43 protective custody.
Okay. And
ship Rose West out in the morning. Oh, by the way, just as a matter of amusement, Rose West wrote to me a couple of times, and she asked if, after a few letters, she said, "I'd like to marry you."
What? Okay, Rose, she proposed.
Yeah, in a lovely letter she wrote to me, very sweet. But I was very diplomatic when I replied to her, because I said, "Well, look, I'm honoured, Rose." I said, "It's an incredible offer." I said, "But unfortunately, I'm living in the Philippines at the moment. I won't be coming back to England."
I was going to say, well, congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, you've got this business, this crime business is very dark. I mean, it's a very dark world. And with my books, all my books, I try, and when I'm talking to you guys and when I'm doing a lecture at the theatre, I try to lighten the load. There are lots of little anecdotes where things get a little bit funny, and, you know, to make, you know, even when police in America or wherever are exhuming a body, you know, there's a bit of black humour there sometimes. They have to do it to get rid of the stress of what they're doing. And I do that with my books.
Yeah, and I completely understand that. I also sometimes throw a bit of you know, dark humor here and there in the podcast, and you have to be careful, especially these days, because I mean, society nitpicks the crap out of everything. I mean, everyone seems to get offended by absolutely everything these days. So I'm glad that we're on the same page with regards to that. And
well, the thing is, the way I look at it, look, you know, I get occasionally, I mean, I had a guy about a month ago he criticised one of my books, which, you know, and he said to me, I got to page 5, he said, he wrote this, he said, I got page 5, he said, your syntax is terrible. So he said, so I put the book down, I'm not going to read any more of your books. And I thought, oh, that's, so I wrote back and I said, thank you very much for that wonderful compliment. I said, I've been trying for years to get my syntax that bad, and you were the first person to congratulate me.
Yeah, it's You know, I mean, it's great that you look at it that way, because there are a lot of people that, you know, it really kind of gets to them for some reason, shape or form. I don't know. You know, I suppose certain people are just sensitive to that. But I mean, it's, yeah, I suppose it depends on background, where you're from and all that stuff. But I mean, that's the way to respond to something like that.
Yeah,
That's
I never
actually the
take,
perfect way.
I never give anybody the satisfaction to think that they got one over on me. I know, you know, I've worked hard all my life. I've never borrowed a penny from anybody. I've struggled on hell. I am what I am. I've got the T-shirts to prove it.
Yes.
The psychiatric profession, you know, psychologists. Nobody from any of these professions, law enforcement, ever criticised my books, because I say it as it is, as we would be talking now.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
I take my readers on this journey, especially my serial killer series books and stuff. I take them on this journey with me. When I go to a theatre, I take them on a journey with me. I involve them. You know, they're my friends. We're on a coach trip, Murder Most Foul.
Yeah.
So, you know, and they're good times and bad times. And I just take the rough with the smooth. Hey, fuck it, they can't hang me.
Exactly.
I mean, they could take away my PC and then I'd commit suicide. But
but back to Joanne. So she tried to escape from prison, and that's a pretty interesting story. It sounds like something out of a spy movie almost.
yeah, well, you know what she did was she was going to cut the thing. They found a small, I don't know what it was. They found a small escape kit, but what her intention was to chop the finger off of a prison officer and use it as the fingerprint thing on the door pad. I mean, you know, I did warn the prison when they got there. You know, I do, you know, I do sort of keep an eye on these people. And I said, look, she's going to kill again.
Oh yeah.
There's no. I mean, she threatened to kill people all the time in there. You know, and the problem is with the prison system. It's a privately run prison, and the prisons are paid, believe it or not, bonuses for keeping people out of their cells rather than keeping them banged up.
Okay.
Right. And the thing is, they put her in down the hole or in the block, as they call it. And then she tries to sue the British government for breach of human rights. Well, if they let her out, she's going to go out onto the yard and she's going to murder somebody. So this. But the other thing was about that prison is they had this big show, and they did what they call the Sisters Act, and they brought a big production company up from London, from Covent Garden or somewhere, and trained all these girls how to dance and dress up in stockings and suspenders and everything else at a cost to the taxpayer of thousands and thousands of pounds. And then charged ordinary members of the public who had no vetting at all, 40 quid or something for a ticket to go and watch these convicts, these drug addicts and killers prancing around in stockings and suspenders all night. And Joanne Dennehy was there serving tea.
Wow. And she, I mean, was she part of the production? Did she just serve tea? And
didn't do any dancing. She was just going around serving tea and biscuits.
didn't she try to kill someone?
Well, she had, previously she had, I mean, this was one of the occasions when she's not in the hole. But, I mean, you know, she bounces in and out of the hole on a regular basis. You know, she's like a rubber ball on an elastic string.
Oh, my gosh. Did you ever meet her parents?
Yeah, I only met her mother. And that was by accident, because I went to see her sister where I thought her sister lived. And but I'm not very clever sometimes, and I knocked on the wrong door. And her mother opened it. And she invited me in, and she was visibly upset. I mean, Martin Brunning, I think, told the mother that I might call.
Okay.
And I was a very sympathetic sort of guy. And everything, but her mother's broken.
Yeah,
Her father and mother are broken. I mean, you can't imagine it, can you?
Yeah, I watched an interview with both of them, and she is visibly extremely affected. She's almost in disbelief.
My daughter's that nice 14-year-old that never came home.
And it's just a helpless situation. It must be terrible what they go through, because it doesn't end. It's not like you can just shut that off. Do you think she would have killed Gary Stretch eventually if she had no use for him?
Well, that's a good question, and it's one I'm often asked, funny enough. And he says,
Okay.
well, would she have killed Gary? Of course she would have done. He was only a tool in her box. He was the enforcer. He was the driver. He was the enabler to help get rid of these bodies, these heavy bodies. He was present at least one of the murders, because his boot print was found in blood. I mean, I already knew this ages ago because I've seen letters between her and Gary where he literally drops himself in it. But once she got tired of him and he was of no further use to her, she would have killed him as easily as anybody else. The fact that he's 7'3" and built like God knows what, that's no impediment to Jo and her ferocity with a knife.
Yeah, I mean, she was like a pit bull. She was. Yeah. And then there was another guy, Mark Lloyd, who also seems pretty horrified during interviews, talking about his interactions with Joanne.
I think she would have killed me without hesitation.
Why wasn't he sentenced?
Well, I'm not sure. My memory's a bit gone on that one. Was he down in the West Country when Gary Stretch was Gary Stretch and Joanna?
He was present with the when she stabbed those two dog walkers.
Yeah, I thought so. He was a friend of Gary's. He was a fence.
Yeah,
that's you got it now. Yeah, I think the thing was with him was I don't think he could have been done for handling stolen property. There's no doubt about that, or certainly a conspiracy to sell stolen property, because they've got some stolen. They had an electric toaster and something they'd stolen. I mean, they were big players, weren't they?
Yeah.
A radio or something from a caravan. They're real big gangsters they were.
Yeah.
He didn't realise what was going on. He hadn't got a clue who Joanne Dennehy was. He just got in the car with Gary and they went to fence this stuff. And then suddenly found himself surrounded by coppers and her with blood all over the place.
Yeah, I just thought it was strange because he was present. As far as I can recall, he was in the car when she stabbed, when she told Gary Stretch to stop, this guy will do or whatever, and then she went to go stab this guy, and 10 minutes later stopped again to stab the other guy. So he was present for all of these, and he kind of didn't do anything. Well, he probably thought, what the hell is going on?
Well, look, let's put it this way. Let's put ourselves and let's put your viewers and our listeners into the same situation.
Yeah.
You get into a car with a 7'3" man with some stolen property, and a woman who goes to an off license and buys half a bottle of whiskey, and they're driving along to fence this stuff off, and all of a sudden Jo says, "Stop, Gary, I want to take that dog," and then she stabs the man. What would we possibly do? We can't run away. We can't fight them and say, "No, Jo, don't do this, don't do that," because she's a homicidal maniac.
Yeah.
So the guy, no wonder he probably shit bricks. I mean, I would have been mortified.
I'm not going to lie, I would probably run.
That's it. What can you do? Maybe you got out of the car. I don't know, but
what led to her capture?
Well, again, you see, this is the problem with the serial killer malarkey. They get too complacent, they get too cocky, they get too greedy. All serial killers, the events get closer and closer together. They get too confident with themselves, their own ability. And what happened was, obviously, the police were trailing them all the way down with CCTV and phone data, telephone mast data. They knew where they were going. And I think probably Joan knew that she was coming to the end of her spree. She just went berserk. And, she was arrested sitting in the car, drunk on this bottle of whiskey, holding this man's stolen dog, grinning from ear to ear. She was, as if nothing had happened.
Jeez. Because Detective Martin Brunning, who you mentioned earlier on, he made a statement which I have mixed feelings about it. Maybe you can kind of set me straight, but he said that she was very calculated and behaves in a way that is not erratic. Now, that to me kind of sounds like the exact opposite of what she was, especially during those last...
Sorry, repeat what Martin said again.
He said, he stated that she was very calculated and believes in a way that, and behaves in a way that she was not erratic, which to me is the exact opposite of what she was.
Yeah, I don't know what Martin's talking about.
She will not consider the consequences of her actions and behaves in a way that is not erratic, it's calculated.
I'll have a look at that. But no, I mean, I suppose what he's trying to say is that she was very confident in the way she killed and did the business. But there's this like Jekyll and Hyde character that this is like erratic the way she just did it. She didn't plan anything very well. The trouble is with many of these killers, and burglars even Gary Stretch, who was a burglar, and policeman told me that he said that when he wasn't cut out to be a burglar, he said, because when he went through somebody's window, his feet followed about 10 minutes later. And he sold, the only thing one place he sold was a chocolate out of a box of black magic, and he left a fingerprint on it. I mean, they're not bright. So what I think is it's easy to kill somebody or do that, but they don't give a lot of thought about getting away with it. There's a lot of planning going into some of these homicides, especially the American ones where their wives, want to kill their husband or boyfriend to get the money. There's a lot of pre-planning, but they don't actually think afterwards, I've got a plan just as equally to get away with this.
Well, she was unusual in a sense that, she's a female serial killer. Aren't female serial killers usually more cunning?
Well, you look at the statistics. There ain't many female serial killers around. I mean, there are very few really, and most female serial killers, they kill for insurance purposes. They stuff their husband or boyfriend up with, thousands of pounds worth of double indemnity life insurance policies.
Yeah,
and then get somebody else to murder them, and stuff like that. But women are not that calculated at the end of the day, because they always make one mistake. I mean, there was a British female serial killer, Black Widow, who killed her 3 husbands with antifreeze. So she killed one husband, and he thought, he had a heart attack or something, and they buried him.
Yeah.
And she got his money. And then she went and they called her the Merry Widow of something or other. And then she killed another one, getting his money, his insurance. So she's almost a serial killer. She's almost done 3. And then at the funeral of the second one, she turns around to her friend and says, her friend says to her, what are we going to do with the sandwiches left over? And this woman turned around and said, we'll save them for the next funeral. And that was what led police eventually to her being caught.
Now, when at
do you want a spam sandwich?
Yeah, no. Well, when she was asked about the murders in during pre-trial, she pretty much surprised, and I'm back at Joanne Dennehy. She surprised, her legal counsel by pleading. She just pled straight out guilty.
Correct.
And she loved the limelight. She liked the media attention. Am I correct?
Correct.
And
See, look, the thing about this is that Joe likes to be in control. She's
Yes.
a control freak. And psychopaths have this innate ability to be able to control other people, manipulate. She's a great manipulator, is Joe. So she's going to court, and her solicitor or barrister has advised her, we can do this, we can plead this and that and the rest of it. And all these other three characters involved with her, all their solicitors are giving them advice, and they're thinking Joe's going to make this trial good for us because she's going to plead not guilty, so we can string it out.
Yeah.
Now, if that had happened, Joe loses control. So what she does is she says, everybody's sitting there on their hands waiting for her to plead not guilty, and she stands up and she says guilty. Takes the control away from the whole court. That's it. I mean, I spoke to the judge, the trial judge, and then also the sentencing judge.
Yeah.
I got all their documents. I think a lot of it's in the book. They were absolutely dumbstruck as well. I mean, a normal person, when they're being sentenced at the Old Bailey, which is the Central Criminal Court, the most famous criminal court in the whole world, in those lovely, historic, austere surroundings where so many British murder trials historically have gone back 100 years or so. She's standing in this wood panelled dock in the whole panoply of the law there in the British criminal justice system, and the judge with his wig on, very solemn, his red robes, and he looks at her and he leans across and he says, now, Miss Dennehy, are you sure you want to plead not guilty? And he looks at her over his glasses and she says, go fuck off.
Is she as close to, she's almost pure evil. There's just no, I mean, there's no, I don't think there's a rehab in the world that can help her or get her on the straight and narrow.
No, she's going to come out of prison in a pine box.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
and if she kills the game, which she will do, there's no doubt about that. I mean, somebody will upset her and she'll do them. There's no, she won't get any more added to her sentence. Yeah, she can't serve any. She got nothing to lose.
Got nothing to lose.
If she does somebody else, she kills somebody else as a guard or another inmate. You know, she's going to, you know, that's it. The notoriety. She's in control again.
How did you start corresponding with her?
Well, I probably like you do when you research your programs. You know, I suddenly saw a newspaper article and I thought, oh, what, you know, I've got like hundreds of people, you know, cases I could do, you know, and I thought, well, hang on a minute, she's British, you know, she's homegrown, potty trained in England on blue top milk, you know, good family, and so I thought, well, I'll have a look at it and see if there's a book in it and see what I can do, and then it just developed from there, really. And then I started writing to her. Now, another interesting thing about this woman is this. In her letters to me, that, as I said previously, they're beautifully written. Yeah. The handwriting's perfect. A syntax and spelling and grammar is spot on. When she's writing to some of her, as you call it, pitbull boyfriends on the out, or when she's writing to Gary Stretch, she's writing to please that particular audience. In other words, to me, she's writing almost, you know, like to suit what she wants at the time, to come across at the time. And she's doing exactly the same to her idiot friends on the outside, speaking in a way that they understand, effing and blinding and bad things. Yeah, yeah. That echoes her pathology in real life. Okay. This is what she's like, a chameleon. She can change her attitude.
She plays to the audience.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. It's just you know, you kind of look back at, I think it was her first victim, the Polish nationalist, what was his name? Lukasz
Slaboszewski.
I mean, that poor bastard didn't stand a chance at all.
Well, no, because what happened with him was that I mean, I'm telling you some stuff that you probably haven't been told before, but I mean, he met her in a shopping mall, and she flirted with him, and then he rang his sister and said in Poland and said, "Look, I've got a beautiful girl. I'm going to meet her tonight." He only walked in the kitchen and he got stabbed in the heart.
Well,
Gary
exactly.
stretched, and they put the body in a wheelie bin in the garden. They left it there to stew for about 4 or 5 days, and then what happened then was they even showed it to one of Gary's accomplices, his friends, his little daughter. They looked in a wheelie bin and there's this body in there.
Yes. Yes, I heard this.
Yeah. So these people aren't bright. And then the other thing, which is where Kevin Lee, the landlord, comes into play, is that he had a beautiful wife. I mean, she was gorgeous, beautiful blonde, and 2 lovely kids.
Yeah.
And he's playing around with Joanne Dennehy, and she says to him one day, she says, "Hey, look, come round my place and put on a black sequin dress." And what a prat. He goes round there. He puts on this black sequin dress, and then she sticks him.
Yeah.
Right now, but the point is, it was Kevin Lee that bought her the car to get rid of Lukasz's body.
Because he owned a kind of a leasing or renting establishment for, I think, people that fell on hard times. I think it was called Quick Let or something like that.
Yeah, Quick Let. Well, the interesting point is how did the body of Lukasz get in a ditch? How was it moved there? Because they didn't have a car at the time. So what Jo did was, because she's got Kevin under her thumb and she could say, "Look, I'm telling your wife that I've been fucking you," and stuff like that in a dress or whatever it was. She says to Kevin, "I need a car because there's a body in that house in Rolleston Garth. I've killed one of the tenants and I need a car to shift him with Gary." And Kevin Lee's caught between a rock and a hard place. So he buys this car. Gary's driving the body, puts the body in a wheelie bin and shoves it in the back of this car. They dump it in a dike out in the middle of nowhere. But then they get rid of the car.
Yeah.
And so they drive it somewhere where all these telephone masts are pinging off their phones and set fire to it.
But this was when they dumped Kevin Lee's body, right?
Oh, they dumped it. Yeah, they dumped Lukasz's body, and then they dumped Kevin was the first body to be found.
Yes.
And then I think it was Lukasz and John Chapman afterwards.
Yeah. And then so he played a big part in his own demise. In some, again, this is where the crazy sense of humor the dark sense of humor comes in. But he pretty much, it's kind of his fault.
Let's have a bit of fun with some of the viewers. Just say he dug his own grave.
He did, and he provided the car to get to his grave as well.
Yeah, funny old world, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, moral of the story is, I suppose adultery is a bitch. But
well, he was playing around with lots of women. I mean, he couldn't keep his pecker in his trousers. That was the trouble with Kevin. Thought he was a ladies' man, and he come unstuck.
And then he got killed with a dress. Well, with. The
body was found in the dike with the sequin dress on it, with the backside stuck up in the air naked, and an aerosol container inserted into his rectum.
I didn't know this. Okay, wow. Jeez, okay.
I mean, that's the final insult, isn't it?
Yeah.
Imagine what Kevin's wife thought when she found that out. Her husband being degraded, and she probably thought, "Well, my God, you swine, Kevin. You've been cheating on me for years, and now you've done this to me, like my family, my kids. I mean, they're victims too."
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, we are joking around. Well, not joking around, but adding a bit of humor to the story, but I mean, it doesn't go without saying that, sympathies go out to, his wife and, other victims' families and stuff like that.
Look, put it this way. Look, Kevin didn't deserve to die. We can't say that. We all make mistakes in life, and we slip up, and we regret it, and everything else. And there's a lot of married men and around that play around, and a lot of women that play around. That's it. Can't take that. We can't denigrate him for that. Yeah. But he was a fool, because when he first met Joanne Dennehy, she walked into a quick lets looking for somewhere to live. His partner, Kevin Lee's business partner, looked at her and said, no, Kevin, don't even go there with her. Look at that guy outside.
Yeah.
Don't go there. But she flirted, like she flirted with that police sergeant when she was arrested, and said, what lovely eyebrows you've got.
You're very distinctive eyebrows.
I know, that's what you keep saying.
And then started flirting with a policewoman.
And the funny thing is about that video is, if that was kind of like a bar scene, I mean, at first the police officer he's like kind of standing, almost towards the back of her. Next thing, he's like next to her, and they're busy having a conversation. It was actually amazing to watch.
I know. I mean, the thing is, I mean, there's a bloodbath in the streets of their city, and the police have nicked them both, and yet the duty sergeant, she's complimenting the charging sergeant with his eyebrows. He's thinking it's quite funny. The policewoman's sort of having a chat, and the copper standing behind her, the one you just mentioned, is getting enthralled in it all.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like,
it's so insane once you delve into this whole story. And I think she said in one line, and this was during the same, it was also during the same video clip, where she compared murdering someone to, I think, going for a Sunday roast, something like that.
Yeah. Murder, something. So going down for Sunday roast.
Yeah. I mean, the other funny thing was that when the police arrested her in the car, Gary Stretch made a bolt for it. He made a run for it.
Yeah.
And he got quite a distance. And unfortunately, Gary was, unlike the Whippet or the Greyhound that they pinched, he wasn't built for speed, was our Gary. And it was run across a muddy field, and because he soon ran out of breath, and all these coppers running after him. And when they caught him, he turned around and said, I'm the most wanted man in Britain. We're the next Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, what an idiot.
Yeah, I mean,
I've written to Gary Stretch through his solicitor, and I asked him if he would like to write to me, and the solicitor wrote back no.
Well, I mean, can he read and write? That would have been my first question. He doesn't seem like the brightest, like the sharpest tool in the shed, to be honest.
No, he's not. Well, the thing is, he can write, because he's written to Joe, and I've read some of his letters. But let's put it this way: they're not exactly a riveting read.
What sets her apart from some of the serial killers that you've interviewed? And is she the worst?
Well, let me just try to sum this up. You're correct. I've interviewed a lot of serial killers, mass murderers, and stuff like that. Probably more than anybody around. I mean, over 30 at least I've interviewed.
Yeah,
face to face. Some on death row, some not. And some of those people are very, very evil. But if I was to say Joanne Dennehy is perhaps the most evil person I've ever met amongst a whole lot of them, that has to say something.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've met, like you say, Bianchi, I've met Sunset Slayer, Dougie Clark, I've met a lot of them, and some women too, and some women serial killers. But Joanne Dennehy stands head and shoulders above the rest of them.
And what is it about her? Because there's something, well, in my, if you look at her, you know, some of her pictures, if you kind of look at her eyes, and it's just, I don't know how to describe it. It's kind of like, this is what evil looks like.
Yeah, if you look into her eyes, they're dead.
Yeah.
Dead eyes. There's no soul behind. They always say that the eyes are the windows to the soul.
Yes.
Right? I mean, when women look into my eyes when I haven't got my glasses on, they go, "Oh, for fuck's sake." but you look into the eyes and they're the windows of the soul. And when you look into Joanne Dennehy's eyes or Kenneth Bianchi's eyes, you're looking at a great white shark. There's totally no emotion in there at all.
Was she a student of other serial killers? Was she a student of the game, so to speak?
No, she didn't. She didn't study other serial killers and look at their MOs or anything like that. It would have been wise if she had done. If she read some of my books, she'd have been a bit wiser now. Wouldn't have been in prison, but she didn't.
And when you interviewed her, what was the? How did that interaction go when you physically went to see her?
Very, very short and sweet. It was. She leant over the table. We exchanged the pleasantries, and then she turned around and she said, "Killing you would be good for me," and she got up and walked off. Not exactly the most productive of meetings, when sometimes I've spent 2 or 3 hours with killers. Yeah, that's it. I mean, and then I wrote to her, and you know, because I mean, in my job, you know, sometimes I spend years corresponding with somebody to get their trust. You know, Michael Ross, who was executed in Connecticut, the roadside strangler. I made a TV program about him. I spent years working with him. Kenneth Bianchi, months and months and months. Ronnie DeFeo, the idiot that he was. You know, a long time sometimes getting to know their personality, to identify with them before you go and visit them, because you can't just knock on the door and go and visit them in prison. You've got to build up some sort of relationship. With Jo, I was hoping to do that, and I actually was reading through some of her stuff, and I asked her, I said, "Is there any truth in these stories that you use drugs?" And she flipped. Martin Brunning said it right in my book. He said, "Christopher, you've certainly pissed her off," and she never wrote to me again.
Why do you think that is? Why did that? Why was that a trigger for her?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think, again, it's because somebody was taking control of her and she didn't like it. She, you know, bringing up this business of drugs, and she was obviously heavily into drugs and serious alcohol and stuff. There's no doubt about that. That's a fact.
But she didn't want that to be the reason.
No.
She wanted to kill because, not because of the drugs didn't make her kill. She's in control. Yeah, okay. Wow. Another crazy aspect of all these things of, you know, with serial killers and stuff is, you know, the people that actually marry them in prison, or some of these serial killers have this huge female fan base, which I think there's a term for it. It's called hybristophilia, which is, I think it's a condition where people are sexually just fascinated with serial killers and people that have done these heinous crimes. What do you make of that?
Note the silence.
That's almost more disturbing than the actual people that committed the crimes.
Well, the amount of women that wrote to Ted Bundy, wrote to Ronnie DeFeo, write constantly to Kenneth Bianchi. You go look at the happy face killer, Keith Hunter Jesperson. I mean, he sends me loads. Well, he did. He sent me loads of photographs of all these lovely girls that were writing to him. Yeah. And on one of them, one letter was a lipstick mark. And I wrote back to him and said, "Oh, who was the lipstick mark on that letter?" He said, "No, that's not lipstick, Chris." He said, "That's menstrual blood."
Oh, geez, like, wow.
I mean, there's look, these, I don't know quite I mean, men are just as stupid. They write to these women behind bars. They see these photographs of these, like, I mean, I read a book about this called Murder.com. You know, these men, right, and we can't always blame the women.
Yeah.
That they see a picture of a Russian tennis player bouncing around in shorts and blonde hair cascading down her back, whacking a ball around. and she's saying, I'm in prison, and you know, I'll fall in love with you, and could you send me some money, blah 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 blah. And or they're in Russia, for instance, could be in Russia, you know, and the guy, we had a black guy in England, a doctor, a married doctor in London, a big guy, black, and he started writing to this girl looked like Anna Kournikova, the fucking tennis player.
Yeah.
And she started off saying, "Oh, my mum's ill. Have you got any money? Can you lend me some money?" And he started sending her money. And then she said, "Oh, my mum wants some flip-flops to get out of her hospital bed. They're $35." I was like, "Fucking $35 for a pair of flip-flops." And he kept, and then he went out there and he took, she said, "Oh, bring some dollars with you." And he got off the plane at the main airport in Moscow, so airport, and never seen alive again. He got whacked.
What was he? Was someone posing as Anna Kournikova?
Yeah, the Russian mafia. I said I've worked extensively in. I mean, I've got a lot of Russian friends, a lot of mafia friends as well. They're really good people generally.
Yeah.
But the point is, with women in prison, women behind bars, they use the same idea. They send a man. The bloke doesn't even look at the Department of Corrections website and check them out. She sends them. One woman was down in Florida or somewhere, and she looked like a 5-star hooker, and she had more tattoos than a fairground worker, rotten teeth, and she was as fat as a pig. But she sent him this wonderful photograph of a beautiful model.
Okay.
And he started sending her money. But she'd been doing the same thing to about another 50 men. But she was cunning enough to have the money sent to somebody outside the prison because she couldn't. At the end of the day, there were sacks and sacks of mail with money in it. And every man got fleeced. So women who fall in love, what do you call it? Histophilia or something? What is it?
Hybristophilia.
Oh, I had a car like that name once. It was a Hybristophilia Mark II. But no, women who do it, they want to have babies with people like Ronnie DeFeo and Ken Bianchi. They set up websites, you know, and pronouncing their love for them, and then they go to prison and they marry them in prison. I mean, can't they find somebody out of prison?
Well, I mean, I spoke to one of the last podcasts I did was with former detective Gil Carrillo, who was on the Night Stalker Richard Ramirez case. And I was asking him about, his, Richard Ramirez's fan base. And he said, during his trial, there were successful female attorneys that were just, in love with him, basically. And he says he's never seen anything like that in his life. It's
aside from Rose West, who pledged undying love for me.
Yeah.
Two others spring to mind. One is Veronica Wallace-Compton, who was Kenneth Bianchi's sidekick.
Yeah.
And then you've got her with writing to Dougie Clark saying they're going to open up mortuaries and have sex with the dead. Well, I interviewed Veronica Berlin in Gig Harbor, and she fell in love with me, and she started sending me these clear covered video cassettes of her heavy breathing and masturbating and being nice to me and saying I love you. We could have done all this if we did other time. And the other one was Melanie Maguire, the Ice Queen out of New Jersey, who chopped her husband up and dumped his body in the Chesapeake Bay. She's a very intelligent woman. And she, when I wrote to her, I didn't think I'd ever get a reply because she had millions of people writing to her and telling. But what I did was I wrote a really nice letter and conqueror paper, airmail stamp, and I sprayed it with Egoist Chanel. And, it was like a multifaceted thing, she could like all this mail, but then all of a sudden she's got something she could smell and go back to and remind her of the old days. Sort of deep psychology going on there. But the point was she fell in love with me because of that. And she started off, "Dear Christopher, you must be psychic. That's my favorite men's cologne." And then it got, "Dear Christopher, dearest Christopher, darling Christopher. Oh, I could love you forever, Christopher." And she's so beguiling, I thought to myself, hang on a minute, she could be a right good catch. I might have to marry this girl. But then I thought to myself, no, wait a minute, Christopher. it's an expensive thing going there to get married to New Jersey, the Garden State. And I thought, no, maybe I'll end up in a fucking suitcase in the Chesapeake Bay. I'll forget that.
You could get, yeah, well, I mean, you could get an interesting book from that. But, Joanne Dennehy, does she get a lot of fan mail? Well, from men?
I don't know how much mail she gets, but I think that anybody that does write to her probably hasn't got an IQ bigger than a pencil.
Yeah. Nice. Insane. Chris, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Well, you're a great guy. I think we sing off the same hymn sheet.
Definitely.
If you need anything from me at all, anything like letters or anything like that, or something, I can always scan them and send them to you. If you want any photographs I've got, if you ever want to do another show, give me a shout.
That would be amazing. I would look forward to that. That would be awesome.
Yeah, and you tell all your readers, as I always say, no nightmares, please.
Will do.
Could be worse. A big fat black rabbit.
You could be what?
Big fat black rabbit.
Yeah, it could be.
It could be worse.
I'm not sure how that would be worse though.
Yeah, worse.
Would it?
Yeah.